What happens when Hollywood royalty sits down for what should be a simple promotional interview, only to face a host whose arrogance knows no bounds? In just 27 seconds of pure television gold, Stephen Colbert would reveal his true colors and destroy any remaining respect viewers had for him. This is the story of how Mark Wahlberg became the unlikely hero who stood up to a bully with a microphone. The studio lights blazed hot that evening as Mark Wahlberg settled into the guest chair across from Stephen Colbert. The audience buzzed with excitement, expecting the usual lighthearted banter between a beloved actor and their favorite late-night host. Nobody could have predicted the verbal warfare that was about to unfold. Colbert leaned back in his chair with that familiar smirk, the one that usually charmed audiences, but tonight would reveal something much darker underneath. He shuffled his note cards with theatrical flair, building the tension like a predator circling its prey. "So Mark," Colbert began, his voice dripping with false friendliness, "you're here to talk about your new movie, but I have to ask about something else first. Your past. You know what I'm talking about." The audience fell silent. Even they could sense something was off about Colbert's tone. This wasn't the playful ribbing they were used to. This felt personal. This felt cruel. Wahlberg's jaw tightened slightly, but he maintained his composure. "Stephen, I thought we were here to discuss the film. My costers worked really hard on this project, and I'd rather focus on that." "Oh, but Mark," Colbert interrupted, his eyes gleaming with malicious intent. "The people want to know about the real you. The you that exists when the cameras aren't rolling. The you that your publicist tries so hard to hide." The studio audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was something else entirely. Something that made them feel dirty just for watching. Wahlberg leaned forward, his voice steady but firm. "I've been open about my past mistakes. I've grown as a person, and I've tried to make amends. But that's not why I'm here tonight." Colbert laughed, but there was no warmth in it. It was the laugh of someone who enjoyed watching others squirm. "Oh, come on, Mark, don't be so sensitive. We're all friends here." But they clearly weren't friends. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. The audience members looked at each other with concern. This wasn't the Stephen Colbert they thought they knew. "You know what I find fascinating about you, Mark?" Colbert continued, ignoring the obvious discomfort of everyone around him. "You've built this whole image as this tough guy from Boston, but you're really just another Hollywood phony, aren't you?" The words hung in the air like poison. Even the cameraman seemed shocked by the host's unprovoked attack. This was supposed to be a friendly interview, not a character assassination. Wahlberg took a deep breath, clearly trying to keep his cool. "Stephen, I don't know what's gotten into you tonight, but this isn't professional. I came here as your guest, and I deserve basic respect." "Respect?" Colbert scoffed, his mask of civility completely gone now. "You think you deserve respect? From me? That's rich, Mark. That's really rich." The audience was stone silent now. You could hear a pin drop in that studio. Nobody knew what to do. Nobody had ever seen their beloved host behave like this before. It was like watching someone they trusted reveal themselves to be a complete stranger. Wahlberg stood up slowly, his chair scraping against the floor. The sound echoed through the silent studio like a gunshot. "I think we're done here, Stephen." But Colbert wasn't finished. He was just getting started. "Sit down, Mark," Colbert commanded, his voice taking on an even nastier edge. "We're not done talking. You don't get to walk away from me." The entitlement in his voice was staggering. Here was a man who clearly believed that his position as host gave him the right to treat his guests however he wanted. Here was someone who thought his platform made him untouchable. Wahlberg turned back to face him, his eyes blazing with quiet fury. "Actually, Stephen, I do get to walk away. That's exactly what I get to do." The power dynamic in the room had completely shifted. Suddenly, Colbert didn't look like the confident host anymore. He looked small. He looked petty. He looked like exactly what he was. A bully who had finally met someone who wouldn't back down. "You can't leave," Colbert stammered, his composure finally cracking. "This is my show. My show." Those two words would haunt him forever. My show. Like he owned not just the program, but everyone who appeared on it. Like his guests were there for his amusement, to be humiliated at his whim. The audience began to murmur among themselves. They were starting to understand what they were witnessing. This wasn't entertainment. This was abuse of power. Plain and simple. Wahlberg shook his head in disgust. "Your show? Stephen, this might be your show, but these are real people you're talking to. Real people with real feelings. And I'm not going to sit here and let you tear me down for your twisted entertainment." Every word hit its mark. Colbert flinched as if he'd been slapped. The truth hurt, especially when it came from someone who clearly saw right through his act. The studio fell into an eerie quiet as Colbert's face reddened with embarrassment and rage. He had been exposed, and everyone in that room knew it. But instead of backing down, instead of apologizing, he chose to dig deeper. He chose to reveal just how ugly his true character really was. "Don't you dare lecture me about real people," Colbert spat, his voice rising to a near shout. "I've been doing this longer than you've been pretending to act. I built this show from nothing, and I can destroy careers just as easily." The threat hung in the air like a dark cloud. This wasn't just unprofessional anymore. This was sinister. This was a powerful man, using his position to intimidate someone who had done nothing wrong except refuse to be humiliated. Wahlberg's expression hardened. "Is that supposed to scare me, Steven?" "Because it doesn't. What scares me is that millions of people watch you every night thinking you're someone worth listening to." The audience gasped. Someone had finally said what many of them were thinking. The emperor had no clothes, and Mark Wahlberg was the only one brave enough to point it out. Colbert's hands trembled with fury as he gripped his desk. "You think you're better than me? You think your little tough guy act makes you special? I know things about you, Mark. Things that would make your fans sick." It was a desperate move from a desperate man. Colbert was grasping at straws, trying to regain control of a situation that had completely slipped away from him. But Wahlberg didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. "Then say them, Steven," Wahlberg replied calmly. "Go ahead. Show everyone exactly who you really are." The challenge was clear. Either put up or shut up. Either reveal these mysterious secrets or admit that he was bluffing. Either way, Colbert had painted himself into a corner with no way out. The host's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. He had nothing. No secrets. No ammunition, just empty threats and hollow posturing from a man who had been used to getting his way for far too long. You can't," Colbert stuttered, his usual quick wit completely abandoning him when he needed it most. "That's what I thought," Wahlberg said, his voice steady and strong. "You're all talk, Steven, all smoke and mirrors, and when someone calls your bluff, you crumble." The audience was completely transfixed. They were watching their supposed hero get dismantled piece by piece by a guest who refused to play his twisted games. Some were recording on their phones. Others just stared in shock. All of them were witnessing television history. Colbert tried to recover, tried to salvage something from the wreckage of his reputation. "Look, Mark, maybe we got off on the wrong foot here. Why don't we start over?" But it was too late for that. Way too late. The damage was done, and everyone in that studio knew it. You can't unsay the things he had said. You can't undo the threats he had made. You can't pretend you're a good person after showing everyone exactly how rotten you are inside. Wahlberg shook his head slowly. "There is no starting over, Steven. Not after this. Not after you showed everyone who you really are when you think nobody important is watching." "Nobody important?" Colbert's voice cracked with indignation. "These people love me. They tune in every night to see me." He gestured wildly at the audience, desperate for validation, desperate for someone to take his side. But the crowd remained silent. They had seen too much. They knew too much. The spell was broken, and there was no magic left to fix it. Wahlberg looked out at the audience, then back at Colbert. "They used to love you, Steven. They loved the person they thought you were. But that person never existed, did he? It was all just an act." The words hit like a physical blow. Colbert actually staggered backward, bumping into his chair. His carefully constructed public image was collapsing in real time, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. "You don't know what you're talking about," Colbert whispered. But his voice lacked conviction. Even he didn't believe his own words anymore. "I know exactly what I'm talking about," Wahlberg replied. "I've met plenty of people like you in this business. People who think fame gives them the right to treat others like garbage. People who mistake applause for respect." The studio erupted in scattered applause, not the usual enthusiastic cheering that Colbert was used to, but slow, deliberate clapping from audience members who were finally seeing someone stand up to a bully. It was the sound of people recognizing truth when they heard it. Colbert's face went white as he realized what was happening. His own audience was turning against him. The people who had supported him, who had made his career possible, were choosing sides, and they weren't choosing his. "Stop," he said quietly, then louder. "Stop clapping. This is my show." But the applause continued. It grew stronger. More people joined in. They were applauding not just Wahlberg's words, but his courage. They were applauding someone who refused to be intimidated by power and fame. Wahlberg raised his hand, and the applause gradually died down. "Thank you," he said to the audience. "But this isn't about me. This is about something bigger. This is about treating people with basic human dignity." Colbert slammed his hand on his desk, the sound echoing through the studio like thunder. "Enough! I've heard enough! Security!" He was calling for security. On his own guest. a guest who had done nothing except refuse to be disrespected. It was the final act of a man who had completely lost control of the situation and was lashing out like a child having a tantrum. But the security guards didn't move. They stood at their posts, uncertain and uncomfortable. They had heard everything, they had seen everything, and they weren't sure who the real problem was anymore. The security guards remained frozen in place, their loyalty clearly divided between their paycheck and their conscience. The silence stretched on for what felt like eternity, as Colbert realized that even his own staff was questioning his authority. His empire was crumbling, and everyone could see it happening in real time. "Did you not hear me?" Colbert screamed at the security team, his voice breaking with desperation. "I said remove him! Get him out of here!" One of the security guards finally stepped forward, but instead of approaching Wahlberg, he walked toward Colbert. "Sir, maybe you should take a moment to calm down. The gentleman hasn't done anything wrong." The betrayal was complete. Even his own employees were taking Wahlberg's side. Colbert's mouth hung open in shock as he realized he had lost everything in the span of a few minutes. His credibility, his audience, his staff, his dignity. All of it gone. Wahlberg watched the scene unfold with a mixture of pity and disgust. "Stephen, this is what happens when you build your career on tearing other people down. Eventually, it all comes back to you." "Shut up!" Colbert shrieked, his face turning purple with rage. "Just shut up! You think you've won something here? You think this matters? I'll destroy you! I'll make sure you never work in this town again." The threats kept coming, each one more desperate and pathetic than the last. This wasn't a powerful television host anymore. This was a broken man, having a complete meltdown on live television in front of millions of viewers. Wahlberg shook his head sadly. "I don't need to destroy you, Stephen. You're doing that all by yourself." The truth of those words hit everyone in the studio like a lightning bolt. Colbert had indeed destroyed himself, live on air, with no help from anyone else. Every cruel word, every petty insult, every abuse of power had been his own choice. A producer finally appeared from backstage, rushing toward the chaos with panic written all over his face. "We need to go to commercial," he whispered urgently to Colbert. "Right now." But Colbert pushed him away violently. "No, we're not going anywhere. This is my show, and I decide when we go to commercial." The producer looked around helplessly, clearly out of his depth. The show was spiraling completely out of control, and the host had lost his mind. Someone needed to take charge, but nobody knew what to do. Wahlberg stepped forward, his calm presence a stark contrast to the chaos around him. "Ladies and gentlemen," he addressed the audience directly, "I apologize that you had to witness this. You came here tonight expecting entertainment, not a temper tantrum from a grown man who should know better." The audience nodded in agreement, many of them now openly disgusted with Colbert's behavior. They had seen their hero's true face, and it was ugly beyond belief. "Don't you apologize for me," Colbert screamed, spittle flying from his mouth. "I don't need your pity. I don't need anyone's pity." But that was exactly what he was getting. Pity. Not respect, not admiration, not even fear. Just pity for a man who had thrown away everything good in his life because he couldn't control his own worst impulses. Wahlberg turned back to face him one final time. "Stephen, I hope someday you get the help you need. I really do, because this isn't who you have to be." It was the final insult, delivered with such genuine compassion that it hurt worse than any cruel word could have. Colbert's face crumpled as he realized that even his enemy felt sorry for him. "Get out," Colbert whispered, all the fight finally drained from his voice. "Just get out." Wahlberg nodded and walked toward the exit, pausing only to shake hands with some of the audience members who had supported him. They looked at him with genuine admiration, seeing a man who had stood up to a bully without becoming one himself. As he reached the edge of the stage, Wahlberg turned back one more time. "For what it's worth, Stephen, I really did come here tonight just to talk about the movie. That's all I wanted." Those words hung in the air as Wahlberg disappeared into the wings, leaving behind a studio full of shocked faces and one completely broken television host. Colbert stood alone at his desk, surrounded by staff members who could barely look at him. The producer tried once more to salvage the situation. "Stephen, we really need to go to commercial now." This time, Colbert didn't argue. He couldn't argue. He had nothing left to say. No clever quips, no witty comebacks, no sharp observations about the world. Just silence, and the terrible realization of what he had become. "Fine," he mumbled, slumping into his chair like a defeated old man. "Go to commercial." The cameras stopped rolling, but the damage was already done. In less than 30 minutes, Stephen Colbert had managed to destroy a career that had taken decades to build, all because he couldn't resist the urge to be cruel to someone who had done nothing to deserve it. The audience filed out in stunned silence, many of them already reaching for their phones to share what they had witnessed. Within hours, the footage would be everywhere. The internet would dissect every word, every expression, every moment of Colbert's spectacular downfall. But Mark Wahlberg was already gone, walking through the backstage area with his head held high. He had come to promote a movie and ended up defending something much more important: the basic principle that fame doesn't give you the right to treat people badly. Behind him, in that now empty studio, Stephen Colbert sat alone at his desk, staring at nothing, finally understanding the true cost of his arrogance. The king was dead, and he had killed himself.